Hello, everyone. Welcome back. And I'm so pleased to say that I'm here with Ted O'Neill, the former Dean of Admission at the University of Chicago. Was that your title? Am I getting it right? Was there any other title? I know Emeritus Professor probably is in there. So,
no, that's grand enough.
okay.
There has been, among other things I've seen in my time in admissions, has been an inflation in titles, but
Yes,
only
exactly.
dean, perfectly enough.
Exactly.
I was also lecturer in humanities.
That's right. You were a lecturer. Actually, I'm just going to say now they used to drive me nuts because it was in the spring and I needed to talk to you and you were in there with your students.
Right. That's right. That's true.
So I would lurk outside your door and drive you nuts. so just so everybody knows, Ted started, well, Ted, why don't you go ahead and actually kind of give us an overview of your career and then we'll start going into things in more detail.
Okay. I started, actually, I was an academic advisor in the Dean of Students office at the University of Chicago while I was working on my PhD there in English. And I did some work for the admissions office. I interviewed students, I read some applications. So I had a taste of what admissions was. But my first admissions job was my first real job in the world. I was the associate director of admissions at the Seminar College of the New School in New York City, which was, as has been my history, a kind of slightly different kind of college, very small, all seminar, no departments. We just all taught the thing we most wanted to teach. And the students were usually younger. They usually came to us after 10th or 11th grade. So it was it was a very serious operation. I mean, it was part of a much larger operation, which was an adult college, but we had younger students and we operated in New York City and Greenwich Village, and the students lived on their own at the age of 16 or so. And that was my start in both teaching and in college admissions.
And this was 1980. So this was also a different era in New York, I think, too. It wasn't, although I guess New York is having struggles again, but I think it was a little rougher around the edges back then.
It was rougher around the edges and it was a little rougher in the village. And our one dorm was on Union Square, which is a wonderful place, but at that time could have been seen as a drug market, among other things. So, our students were young and mature. They grew up fast. They learned how to live a city life, and they were young intellectuals. I mean, they wouldn't have come had it not been for the fact that they were very interested in their liberal arts studies and in ideas. So, a very interesting setting for me to begin. Not so unlike University of Chicago in some ways, where I'd spent a lot of time working on my degrees. The dean was a Chicago graduate. About 8 members of the faculty were Chicago graduates. So, there were some similarities and some significant differences. But that was my start. And
then what drew you? I'm sorry, what drew you back to Chicago?
Well, another, and a chance to come back, and a job offer, a job at a significantly larger and more, in some ways, impressive place. So I came back as an associate director of admissions after 2 years in New York, and joined some old friends, and joined a university I was very fond of and very much respected.
I mean, honestly, I like our career in some ways is somewhat similar, because I went to and worked at Reed College, which is kind of similar to the New School, very intellectual, very kind of self-selective, I think, in the way the New School is. Definitely not as well known as Chicago, although Steve Jobs dropping out of there and then his biography seems to have helped the profile. So, but that was something that I think I was kind of maybe similar to you too, in that when I applied to Chicago, it was the only school I was applying to. I was happy where I was, but I thought, here's an opportunity to work at a place that I've kind of thought of as like the Mecca of intellectualism, and So I was really glad to go there and kind of experience that on sort of an institution that's really known at a global level. Never have I regretted that I attended Reed or started my career there, but being exposed to an institution like Chicago was pretty special.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of curious about your thoughts about that.
Well, I think it is special in the ways you mentioned. And I think one of the interesting things about the people I like most at admissions is that they follow their educational interests, not just a bigger job and or more money. The money's never very big anyway, but more money. So the fact that you went from Reed to Chicago with a stop in between. I know that I went to back to Chicago, but was at the new school where we were really starting something different and starting something interesting. And then my subsequent jobs, which were minor and short-lived, but after 20 years at Chicago, working for a while for St. John's in Albuquerque, and then doing some work really as a consultant for Deep Springs College in California, and then working at Bard College Berlin, all places that I found different and interesting. All the struggle in admissions terms, even Chicago in those days, which is now doing splendidly and getting many more applications than they need. But in those days, not so popular. Respected for all the reasons you mentioned, but that respect frequently scared people off. Thought of as very difficult, very eggheady, not much fun. Cold, which it is today, and
yes,
it should be. So I guess in some ways I was lucky in my career, but in some ways I did what you did. I followed my interests and I respected every place I went, even though the admissions task wasn't necessarily easy. It's not like going to a place where that automatically kind of has a big applicant pool and people clamoring to get in. Not true in any of those cases. And I respected the places more for that, to tell you the truth. And we had to work a little bit harder and could try to do things somewhat differently, and could admit students who weren't absolutely perfect by the numbers, but who were very interesting people and interesting thinkers. So, that affords you a little bit of freedom working in admissions, a freedom that I think we can talk about this more later, but freedom that a lot of people don't have anymore. They are really forced to seek perfection, so-called perfection, in the students they're admitting, which I think is a lot less interesting.
A lot less interesting. I also think that because of it, high school students are a lot less able, who are sort of want a school like University of Chicago. They feel like they're not able to just explore interests in the way that I think was more possible back in the day, where you could just explore your interests, be an intellectual, and still be competitive for these schools. Now, on the other hand, the upside is that there are still all these wonderful colleges out there, and you've just named multiple of them. So, yeah,
it's true. I mean, if I were that kind of kid, I'm not sure I was when I was 17. I wish I had been, but if I had been that thoughtful, idea-seeking, adventurous kid, and I knew what I know now, and I don't know really enough about the range of possibilities, but right now, and if I were to be the kind of student who is a pretty good student, but not a straight A student, and not someone with tremendously high SAT scores, if that matters anymore, I still would know that there are places like Bard College Berlin that does amazingly wonderful things in the liberal arts, where entry isn't quite so forbidding. You have to be a certain kind of student, but you don't have to be the perfect student. And I think that's liberating for schools and for colleges, certainly for admissions people.
I feel like it is harder to make the case also now to parents about schools like that. Like that's something that was already a little bit of a challenge with Reed when I was there, but sort of, I feel like much less so, at least. I mean, maybe it's just my change in focus because at this point I'm advising parents and high school students, and I'm always advocating for small liberal arts colleges. I'm always trying to throw in women's colleges. I'm always trying to discuss, like places like Bard, if it's the right student, et cetera. And often the student will be all in, their eyes will just get so big when I talk about like a place like Bard where you can combine biology and film and, whatever. But the parents are like, my kid's going to be unemployed,
Yeah.
and I think that that's where some of that pressure is coming from. Would you say so?
Oh, I think so. And when we talk about changes over time that I've been doing admissions now, in effect, 40 years, I think parents have changed, and I'm not sure why they've changed because, America's been in pretty good shape. People aren't out of work.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you go to a Bard and major in film and biology, it doesn't mean you're cast adrift in the economic world.
Mm-hmm.
People get jobs. People do very well. So the panic that parents feel that students have to do certain things or they will never have a job seems to be entirely mistaken if you look at the economics of America and the time we're talking about. But they've gotten panicky. They really think they've persuaded themselves, even the ones who had liberal arts educations and loved them.
Mm-hmm.
They seem to think that times are so changed that if you don't major in business or economics or engineering, you're simply going to be lost for life.
Mm-hmm.
Not true, Of course, I know Chicago best, but we had no business majors. We had no engineering majors. We just did the liberal arts. We did a Common Core liberal arts, and everyone eventually got jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Not always the first month, but people do very well.
Mm-hmm.
They're smart thinking people. They're ambitious. They know how to work hard, and they're rewarded for that. So
Mm-hmm.
parents should calm down,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not calm.
Mm-hmm.
They're not calm in terms of what their kids will study, and they're not calm in terms of trusting colleges to do their job without needing the biggest name or the most prestige or having the highest rankings, which of course is another thing that's changed and that we can talk about,
Mm-hmm.
the existence of rankings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, parents are, it's very funny. You work with them, and I worked not with them.
I just want to interject quickly that you are
Yeah.
a parent and you had
Yeah.
2 kids.
Right.
Who probably didn't major in anything very practical, although I might be wrong.
No, well, English,
Yeah.
So many admissions people were English majors.
Mhm.
Yeah, my daughter did English and my son did international relations, and I didn't need to push them in any direction. They just followed their inclinations. I knew it would work out for them, and it did. The world has treated them very well,
Mm-hmm.
and I never really worried about that. But I know parents do, and I know that's one of the things, especially you have to encounter face to face all the time. I didn't have to encounter it face to face. Parents were always very polite, when they were talking to the dean of admissions, even if they thought what I was talking about was crazy. But no, and students have changed. It's not just the parents. I mean, they do seem to be more practical in their orientation. They do seem to want to do the thing that might get them ahead in the world. Not what did we care about when I was applying to college in the 60s? We cared about changing the world, and not so much getting ahead in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So students have changed to some degree, probably not as much as the parents, but the parents have taken on this sense of responsibility for their kids' success in the world, and it affects the way they think about college. It's too bad.
Mm-hmm. I think that's an interesting notion, what you've said, that they've taken on the responsibility. So I always thought that maybe the root of this was financial because higher education is so much more expensive, and I'm sure that's playing part of the role. But I think part of the other piece of it is parents feeling that sense of responsibility that I don't think my parents felt that same level of responsibility. They wanted to launch me off. They were willing to pay for college, but then it was kind of up to me to get it
Yeah.
done, you know?
Well, notoriously so. I mean, you see it more closely than I do. I mean, I read about it. I know parents are involved or too involved, um, and that's a change too. I mean, when you talk about the 40-year stretch, it's remarkable that in my short lifetime, uh, so many things have changed in so many ways. And I
Hmm.
think parental behavior, at least amongst the middle class of America, has, I think, truly changed.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I think you're right. It's pretty interesting. I don't speak as a parent, but from working with lots and lots of parents, and in my case, I started working in admissions in 92. So
Mm.
yeah. Um, let's talk a little bit. You mentioned US News and World Report. And as you said, I think that that is responsible for a lot of the changes in admissions. So can we maybe pivot to that? I think it'd be interesting to hear your perspective on it.
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about it. I mean, what I will say has been said by many, many people before. I mean, it's so obviously a blight on college admissions and the way we think about colleges that everyone kind of condemns it, but everyone pays attention to the rankings. I mean, I haven't seen them in many years, but you have to confess to kind of guilt of saying, well, I don't know small liberal arts colleges in the South. Let's see what US News and World Report says. And, you do get a certain amount of information there, but it's a judgment, and the judgments are very bad or the ill-founded.
Mm-hmm.
So, and of course, anyone who works in admissions or works with students who are thinking about college knows that these rankings take on much too much weight. They
Mm-hmm.
relieve people from doing a lot of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
You want students to be thinking beings. You don't want them to look at what a magazine says is good. Um, and in fact, the magazine doesn't even really say this is better than that. They just say this is college is richer, this
Mm-hmm.
college is and more prestigious, more popular. Um, those are all things that aren't really measures of quality.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd think students would know that, and you'd certainly think parents with their experience in life should know that, but they don't seem to. They actually
Mm-hmm.
think this is an honest or a best approximation of judgments about quality.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Drives you crazy. And I mean, that's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is from a practitioner's point of view. And if you're a dean of admissions, your job, explicitly or not, is to do better in the rankings
Mm-hmm.
and not educate students better, not do a better job of teaching people, but becoming more popular,
Mm-hmm.
becoming more selective.
Mm-hmm.
Hence,
Mm-hmm.
part of the desire, not all of the desires can be attributed to this, but part of the desire to get more and more applications so you can turn down more and more people, so
Mm-hmm.
you can appear more and more exclusive, and that pays in the rankings, and of course it leads to bad behavior.
Mm-hmm.
It leads admissions people to do things they really shouldn't be doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there have been cases of inflated SAT or ACT averages,
Yeah.
but more. I I do think that's fairly rare. At least I really hope it is. But what's actually quite common these days is how much colleges really pay attention to yield, because isn't that a measure on US News and World Report? I know it was a big thing for a while, and so for our
Yeah.
listeners, yield is basically of the number of students who you admit, what percentage of them actually come. that at least used to play a role in US News and World Report ranking. It has nothing to do with quality. But as a result, I've seen certain schools, like I had a student who was, a school was a safety for her basically by the numbers. She was well above these schools' averages. And by the way, a great kid. I mean, even if her numbers had been lower, I'm very fond of this young woman. She's incredibly impressive and thoughtful. And they deferred her. And I'm 100% positive it was for yield reasons. And she thought, did I mess something up on my application? And I had to reassure her, no, you really didn't. This is just a school making a decision based on yield.
Well, it's one of the things we should talk about is the way computerization has changed things, because we're talking about a period when computers essentially didn't exist, at least as personal computers on people's desks, to a time when computers are driving a lot of what we do. But knowing things about students, which one would think is an absolutely good thing, can be very dangerous. You can ill use the knowledge you have. So you can, for example, now, unheard of when I started doing admissions work, you can really know a lot about students and their preferences.
Mm-hmm.
You, like an advertising company, like a marketing firm, marketing firms actually playing a pretty large role in this. You can tell who might come and who might not come. Not who's a better student, not who's a better fit, not who deserves it in whatever way we mean deserve.
Mm-hmm.
But we can tell if that very good candidate is less likely to come.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're so good, they'll be admitted by so-and-so, therefore we won't admit them.
Mm-hmm.
That constitutes lying to students, because what we say is not, we're going to admit people who we think are going to come. We say we're going to admit the students who are best suited to us, who are most talented, who are most meritorious. And it's frequently just a lie.
Mm-hmm.
So put them on the wait list and see if they'll hang around. And if they hang around, it's more likely that they'll accept our offer, and then we'll look better. We'll have a better yield.
Mm-hmm.
What any of this has to do with real education is it's very distant from educational concerns. It's all marketing concerns. It's all public relations concerns. So admissions people have really become not just marketers, which in effect we always were, because we're trying to put the best face on things and persuade people to apply and come, but we're a public relations people.
Mm-hmm.
We want to make our place seem popular so that we seem better, so that more applicants flow in, so our alums are happier and contribute more money, and everyone falls for it. College presidents who you think would know better fall for it. College faculties who are so smart fall for it. Everybody wants the ranking. Everybody wants more applicants. Everyone wants a higher yield rate. And so little of it has to do with what you're there for, which is to educate students. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, one of the things I like to point out to people too is everybody deserves a top-notch education. I mean, you shouldn't have to have been perfect in high school to have access to really, really like interesting educational opportunities, And I think that again, like that's one of the things, like when I was at Chicago, we were still able to take some risks, it was sort of less and less, but I remember taking a student who had just written the most brilliant essay, and he wasn't perfect, but he was sort of like amazingly thoughtful. And you went for it. Like I hand delivered his file to you, and you read it. You were like, this kid is something special. And we were still able to do things like that.
Yeah. We could do it. We could do it because we weren't. I mean, Chicago now admits, I mean, it's ludicrous, and I pay no attention to this except everyone blares it out so publicly. I think Chicago probably admits like 5 or 6% of the people who apply. If you're admitting 5 or 6% of the people who apply, and your eye is on how much they can pay and other kinds of contributions they can make, you just can't take chances. There's just no room for chances. You
Mhm.
want the SAT averages, at least I'm speaking like an old timer now. Maybe SATs don't matter much anymore, but you want your SAT averages to be higher than everybody else's, and completely meaningless when it comes to who's suited to a liberal arts classroom. SAT scores, in my experience, and I was teaching for 25 years while I was doing this admissions work, didn't matter. Well, other things matter. That kid who essay you brought me, that mattered. That's what we do. If you can write like that, then you're most of the way there. If you get a 780 on your math score, it doesn't even mean you're a good mathematician.
Mhm.
It just means you've been trained to take the test pretty well. You have a certain facility. It's not meaningless, but it doesn't mean you're a thoughtful mathematician or ever will be.
Mhm.
So yeah, being able to take chances and as you know, there are plenty of places that still need to take chances. So, it's, if we speak about this as if everything hinges on whether you get in to the Chicagos or the Ivy Leagues of the world, you're missing so many
Mhm.
possible opportunities, because there are tremendous colleges that are languishing because they can't get enough applications. What happened? They used to be held in high regard, but now they're held in lower regard because they aren't as popular as these other places. So as students, I think they shouldn't despair. They should celebrate the fact that there are real options out there of very fine places, but we're kind of losing that sense of excitement about finding the right place and finding the place that does such a good job because they care so much about their students, or do something so different, or have a curriculum that is not just like everybody else's. So this is not all bad news, but I think it's frequently seen as all bad news.
Mhm.
So hard to get in. Therefore, I have to apply to more places.
Mhm.
The more places they apply to, the happier colleges are, because their numbers go up, numbers of applicants go up, but everything is more confused. No
Mhm.
one knows what will happen. How can you predict? So you have to apply to, what did people used to apply to 4 or 5 places, and now they apply sometimes to 20 places, as you know.
Or
And
30 even. I mean,
yeah,
I don't let my students do that, but yeah.
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 And so that means everything's confusing. Nobody knows what's going to happen. You can't predict anything. The only people who can predict things reasonably well are the people who have all the information, meaning the college admissions offices that have everything in their computers. They
Mhm.
can judge, did you visit? Did you look at, how long did you look at our website? They have some knowledge of people, the way people may behave,
Mhm.
but students can't predict.
Mhm.
Therefore, they have to do things that are kind of foolish. Apply to
Mhm.
30 schools, ridiculous.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I think, as you said, things get confusing. And so I do have sympathy for the students. I mean, I want them to be more
Of
thoughtful
course.
about this, but at the same time, they're dealing with the pressures from their peers. They're hearing, I mean, I remember when I was in college, I was taking a bus and this guy started talking to me. And when I told him I was a history major, he was like, well, what are you going to do with that? And I'm like, Mr. On the bus, who I'm just being polite to, is going to judge my major.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, I really think everything's going to be fine. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And it was, it has been very much so. So, yeah, like I feel like it would be great to be encouraging. And I do think the right way to be encouraging is by talking about these other schools out there that are really wonderful,
Mm.
you know?
Well, the wonders of education are frequently the last things we talk about. I mean, can I imagine how great it would be to be a 18-year-old and go to St. John's in Albuquerque, in Santa Fe or
Mhm.
Annapolis, and read those great books with kids who really care, with
Mhm.
teachers who are masters of not just talking about things, but listening.
Mhm.
Amazing opportunity, thrilling.
Mm-hmm.
but we don't talk. I mean, we're seen as, like the man on the bus saw you as a history major. They see that kind of talk as naive talk. What's it about? All about? Where's it going to go? What's it going to happen? Um, I think we as educators have backed away from the excitement and of course, my own interests are that in liberal arts education. So I think, of course, liberal arts education is the absolute way to go for everyone, which I actually kind of believe. But I'm no reason why a mechanical engineer can't be as excited about the prospect of doing that in a place that does it well, and where there
Mm-hmm.
are fellow students who are as involved as you are, and where the teachers are great. Um, but the liberal arts to me seems to me such a basis for prospectively happy life.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's all about. How do I live a life? That's what the education's about. So if you have the opportunity to do that when you're 18, and know that when you're 22, you're going to have to somehow figure out what comes next, and something always comes next. You'll be trained somewhere, you'll go to law school, you'll do something, something happens that suits you to the American economy as it exists. There's just it's such a treasure when you're young to be able to have that kind of education. But we
Mm-hmm.
don't talk about that. I mean, I think we're embarrassed to talk about that, or we think it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
If when you were at Chicago, I think we were engaging marketers, basically people who are going to, get our material out fast. That was
Mm-hmm.
our main interest, but they also had ideas about how you do these things. And their ideas were always, don't tell them too much. If you tell them too much, you give them things that they might not like, might turn them off. Don't tell them anything right off the bat. Wait until later. What kind of educational message is that you don't want to reveal yourself because it might turn people off?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I
so
remember. Oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Well, I remember talking to Michael Banky, who was the vice president when I was there, and he said that his goal was just to get the word out, because most at University of Chicago before he got there, a lot of students were coming from the same schools, and so the way he looked at it was, let's just get the word out to more people. Right. So we're not trying to artificially raise applications, but let's make sure people who haven't heard
Yeah,
of Chicago, who are the right fit. And I thought, well, that's a lovely way to expand the pool. That's the right way
yeah,
to do it. Not
yeah.
just trying to get but educate people along the way about what kind of institution it is. Yeah.
And we have the tools to do it, because with the advent of personal computers and the internet, you had cheaper and easier ways to get your message out. If you're willing to give a message, at least get your name out. Depends on how much you're willing to say. Yeah, we lived in an age when we could actually convey information much more efficiently, and students had better opportunities to know about colleges. Whether they took advantage of it or not, it's kind of up to them, because it
Mm-hmm.
was all out there. I mean, so many, it's such a better scene in so many ways, because people feel they can apply widely, not meaning applying to 30 schools, but meaning, hey, I can apply to a school in Portland, Oregon, even though it's really far away, and
Mm-hmm.
even though it's expensive, because I know there's something like financial aid that works pretty well. And I don't have to apply to schools based on sect or race or gender. I can apply anywhere,
Mm-hmm.
and almost all places have at least a semblance of financial aid that can support me if I need it.
Mm-hmm.
That makes for a much better world. Of course, it also makes for lots and lots more applications, which causes some problem, as we've already talked about. And then, of course, when you add to that the artificially boosted number of applications, then you start to get into trouble. But no, it's a better world in that students have more choices, more information,
Hmm.
can go more widely. You know, so to balance the bad, there's that good, and that good is very good.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and exactly. I mean, some schools don't give grade 8 packages, but lots of schools do that students aren't aware of. I mean, and so I'm constantly trying to encourage students, try it, apply, see what
Yeah,
happens. If it's does the money doesn't work out, you don't have to go. But if you don't apply, you're not going to know. And I do think that is a good reason, to apply to a few more schools. Like, don't
yeah,
trophy hunt, don't try and but it is fair to apply to a few more schools to make sure that you have that aid package that is affordable, you
yeah.
know.
I know that's true.
Yeah.
You actually can never know. But I would say in general, financial aid is probably more available than people know.
Yes, I think in
A lot of
general.
people simply won't apply because they think they can't afford it.
Hmm.
And being able to afford it is something you'll never know until you see a financial aid package.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, and of course, as schools are competing, they either make better or fairer packages, or they throw merit money into the mix, which
Hmm.
is a problem in some ways, but it also benefits some students.
Hmm.
Something you'll never know about until you actually apply. Um,
And that's a change as well, Ted, isn't it? I mean, merit aid really started to take off. I'm not sure I even knew about scholarships.
yeah,
Like, I mean, I just knew about financial aid when I went to college and then when I worked at Reed. And then I started hearing it feels like more and more schools are offering it.
yeah, I think that's probably true. It's funny because to many people in America, and probably to everyone at a certain stage, scholarship meant, oh, you win a scholarship because you're really, really smart, and people are going to give you money because of your talents. And of course, we lived through an era where basically the money was dispensed based on your need.
Mhm.
And then, of course, places started to compete with money. Um, and there was always some defensive explanation. I mean, at Chicago, we had merit scholarships way back. And, the basic reason was, well, we're as good as these other guys, but we can't attract the students because they don't want to come as badly as they want to go to the other place. Therefore, we're going to give them monies to persuade them to come. Okay, very selfish reason. It
Mhm.
was very limited, and it didn't mean it was impossible for us to meet the full need of all our needy students. So
Mhm.
I think it was relatively benign.
Yeah,
It
it
it got
was.
to the yeah, it got to the point where colleges realized that they would use money, and they could hire people who could tell them exactly how much money it would take to attract students. They could do an analysis of every family and what they wanted from a college and what their financial situation was. And they could say, this is how much it'll take to get them to our college.
Mhm.
So the idea that you're meeting need disappears. And even financial aid, not just merit money, but merit money is so mixed in when you start to do things like that, that uh, you use the financial aid package as an inducement,
Mhm.
not as a rescue. Um, and that started to happen in a lot of small colleges. Again, their reasons were, we're getting killed out here. People don't want to go to small colleges as much as they used to. We have to compete with the big state schools that are cheaper. We have to compete with the more prestigious guys who have more money and more better rankings. So we'll start to give people money as if under the table,
Mhm.
pretending that it's meeting need, but really giving money in advance of need because
Mhm.
we want to enroll these kids. And the whole system really teetered, you know. Uh, so merit money has now become so mixed in that nobody quite knows what need-based financial aid is. And of
Mhm.
course, a lot of that merit money had to come out of the need-based pool.
Do you think that that's still the case, though, even at the wealthiest schools? I mean, I know that's the case at schools that are less wealthy,
Yeah,
but my sense has been that places like the Ivies and even Chicago has merit, but my sense is they're still meeting full need,
yeah,
which I think is because
because
they're
colleges are very
well
rich.
off.
Colleges can be very rich, I mean,
Mhm.
we can talk about how poor we are, but we actually can be very rich. I mean, the endowments are big, and nobody knows really what endowments mean and what they're for. Um, if
Yeah, I heard someone describe Harvard as a hedge fund with a little education
yeah,
side
it's like
hassle.
it's like a bank. I mean, they don't need that money. They won't ever need all that money, but they always want more, and they'll always get more because people
Right.
want to please them and want to be associated with them. Okay,
Hmm.
that they're an odd case. The other odd case is
Yes.
Bard College, where the president says, no, we're not a bank. We want to use our money. Let's use it all. Let's educate people in prisons. Let's have colleges in Tajikistan. Let's be sure that our students are supported in the way they need to be, and forget the business about saving lots of money for some
Hmm.
future disaster. Why do it? You're educating now. Make use of the money. And I
Hmm.
think, and as a consequence, a place like Bard can do some very exciting things that no one else thinks they can do. They either
Hmm.
don't have the ideas, one problem, or they feel they can't spend the money.
Hmm.
Too bad.
Hmm.
Spend it all and do good things.
Yeah, I mean, Bard's prison program is amazing, and I
That's
keep hearing
amazing.
about it. Yeah,
Their
and
international programs and their high school programs.
right.
I mean, they have high schools in, like the poorest neighborhoods in six or seven or eight American cities, and they educate kids and give them associate's degrees at the end of their 4 years of high school,
Hmm.
because they do such a good job with them and they hire a certain kind of faculty. They do amazing things, and it's cost a heck of a lot of money.
Hmm.
You can't save it all for some time later if
Hmm.
you're going to do those kind of expensive and imaginative things. And not many colleges have that spirit.
Hmm. No, not many at all. But there are other colleges, as you said, trying to do something really different. I mean, Deep Springs is
Yeah.
another example of a school that, why don't you describe what it is? Because I think most people haven't heard of it.
Well, it's funny. There was a segment on 60 Minutes recently about it. It was very informative and good. I mean, it's an odd place, and it's very small. And in terms of American education, it's such a drop in the bucket. It almost doesn't matter, except it's a good example.
Hmm.
It's a place that was funded, I think, 1917 by a very rich man who wanted a college where the students would actually work on a ranch while they were studying. And they were to be trained in mostly liberal arts, but also in leadership. The idea was that they would be leaders in American society one way or another. And many have become politicians. And it was all male for a long time because those were the terms of the original will. But that will has been broken so that now it's men and women in equal numbers, living out in a desert valley, working every day to make the place run, cooking the food, cleaning the place, working on the ranch, um, taking the cows up in the mountains, and doing serious intellectual work.
So,
Now it's
Ted, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt because we're almost done. We only have 1 minute
okay.
left, so I have to kind of close it out. But thank you so much for being on the show. And hopefully people have heard this and kind of understood how broad the opportunities really are here in this
Yeah, I hope
country,
so.
even now. Yeah.
Yeah, good. Well, you do
Okay.
good work, Sally. I mean, that's your job. So,
Okay. We're doing my best. All right. Thanks, everyone. And yeah, we'll be back next week.